Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mainstream Indie Music channel. A continuation almost of last week, as we had touched on this band when we talked about James Mercer and the Shins, and they are so also impactful in the world of indie or alternative rock music, especially around, the end of the 1990s going into the early 2000s. And this song itself is probably, I'd say, in almost every single, you look up a Spotify playlist on like indie music or indie music from the 2000s, whatever. This song, I almost guarantee you, is going to be on this playlist. The song in question is Float On by Modest Mouse. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing for Modest Mouse, especially during this period of time when this song was released. A lot of things were happening behind the scenes that was making it difficult on the band, and the band members themselves even wondering if this was going to keep going and continue. But of course, before we go all that, let me just send a warm welcome to you all for visiting. If this is your very first time checking out the channel, welcome. And if you are returning, a special shout out for you if you are a subscriber. We reached 1250. As I've told you all before, the number 50 means a lot to me on this channel because, I work a lot of jobs, I work a lot, and this channel was kind of, and still is, like a passion project of mine. And I remembered us even reaching 50 subscribers. And I remember it a lot because we were bouncing between 48, 49, and 50 for like weeks on end. So to have 1,200 more of you here for that, to hear me listen and talk about, early 2000s indie rock music and other time periods and genres as well. I really appreciate it, you guys. So thank you for listening every single week. And let's move on to this story. So Modest Mouse had actually been a band, probably a lot of you know if you're watching, for a while before the song Float On was released. The three band members, Isaac, Jeremiah, and Eric, had been friends since their teenage years, and it was another one of those indie bands that they started out in their late teens, like towards the end of high school, maybe some college, and they started the band not really knowing where the group was going. They just kind of wanted to test it and see, because even when they formed the band in the late 90s, I would even say mid-90s. I've seen some say that it was 95, 96, even when the band got started. So their very first album had not been released until 2000 and 2001. A big kind of ongoing story with the band Modest Mouse is, other than those three band members, and eventually just kind of went down to two band members as well, that there's a rotation of people that go in and out of the band of Modest Mouse. It seems like there's never any bad blood between people. A lot of times they get pulled into other projects, or the people that they kind of sign on to join them while touring are already in bands, and so they kind of return back to the bands that they had come from once the tour is over. But alas, their first album was released near the end of 2000, but it wasn't officially released by the record label until 2001. It's interesting because around the time they decided to make another song, and they decided to license the song. They made a song for, first it was on their album, but they licensed it, and a Nissan commercial liked the song so much that they picked it up. It's interesting because the kind of method behind it, Isaac kind of acknowledges that, maybe this wasn't the most quote-unquote indie move or ethical move kind of a thing, but, he mentioned like they all kind of came from poor backgrounds, and maybe not poor, but they didn't come from a family of money that they could live like off of savings while they decided to make music together. They needed to get income coming in so that the band could continue to tour, to pay their dues, and to release their music, essentially. Because, again, you have to remember the time period. This is before the internet got going, that bands could kind of freely get their music out there. There was just kind of very limited avenues for them to go down. If this wasn't it enough, right during the actual recording, maybe even a little before the actual recording for the album Good News for People Who Love Bad Things, Jeremiah Green, who was Modest Mouse drum player, had a nervous breakdown. This was a big deal because, again, he's one of the founding members of the group. They always kind of have people coming in and out. And for Isaac, this was a huge source of stability, that suddenly he was gone and he was going through a really rough time. You know, if you look up kind of the story of that happening, he kind of switched his medication because he had been dealing with a lot of anxiety problems. And the band kind of pressured them to get back, you know, which makes sense. They're right in the middle of starting to make an album. He comes back and his issues still are so bad that he ends up like leaving and running away. And they said in reports that he was gone for like weeks, maybe even months afterwards, not contacting people after that fallout. So Modest Mouse had to go forward and move on with a drummer from the Helios Sequence, another indie band, when they made that album. On top of it, Isaac talks about saying that he suffered a lot of personal losses during that time period too, so it was rough. You know, they were definitely going through it when that album got released. It's funny because Isaac says that despite all the darkness of what was happening in his personal life, a lot of uncertainty was happening in the world at large. You know, it's early 2000s. It's right after the 9/11 terror attacks and the United States going back into war. A lot of bad things happening all at the same time. He wanted to write something positive, you know, so he almost flipped all that negativity that he was going through and completely turned it around. The song Float On, as you know, has some very interesting and funny lyrics to it where the main character is going through a very rough time but decides to see his circumstances in the world in a different light. So it's really echoing what he's going through. Very simple song structure as well. Some kind of like floating, airy guitar and synth going on in the background. Very light drums as well. But it was a huge, huge hit. And the album went to critical acclaim. A lot of people also know the song based off of Rock Band and Guitar Hero as well. That song was very heavily featured. And it got out there. Modest Mouse's huge success that they still continue to tour off of to this day is off of this album and these songs that were featured, the hit singles off that album as well. Now, our ranking for the underground indie ranking, I'm going to leave them just under the surface.
The band name is heard.
A lot of people probably know that song, which is what's keeping them up there, but outside of those songs such as Float On,
right at the
not a lot of people know who Modest Mouse is. But what do you all think? I want to hear from you guys, and I'll see you all next week. Peace.